what we do now, like, you know, you've got a little 2-year-old who will just, it's exhausting and it's challenging, and no, you know, you can go from bliss to sort of sheer misery in the space of 30 seconds when,
Yeah.
you know, you're tired, you're trying to,
But
what were you going to say?
But it's worth doing this because
Yeah.
it's worth putting in the time now so
Yeah.
that relationship, and you can build the adult that they're going to be.
Yes.
And it's so interesting with the parenting stuff, wanting to make sure what you're doing now is setting them up for the future. But then also,
Yes.
if the parenting you had, and you know,
Yes.
do the best they have with the information they have,
Yeah.
and new information about what's helpful is coming out all the time. And if
Yes.
you have the best information, you may not have been parented in a way that was helpful. And what
Yeah.
I found is at that point of adulthood, when you transition from being a child under your parents to being an independent adult, there's still a child part of yourself that creates
Yeah.
that vulnerable part of yourself, the part that wants to be loved. You know,
Yeah.
you need to take over the parenting role. And unfortunately, we seem to take the parenting that we've had and then apply it to ourselves. And so if our
Yeah.
parents are really critical, we become
Yeah.
really critical.
Yeah.
You know, if we were never good enough for our parents, it's likely we'll feel never good enough for ourselves. You know, nothing
Yeah.
going to like
Yeah.
please that person in our head who just keeps, you know, going
Yeah.
at us.
And
so
guilt was a big thing in my family. There was a lot of, you know, a lot of kind of subtle laying on of guilt. And that's something I've had to really work hard at, you know, letting go of that sort of terrible feeling I'm doing this wrong, and you know, I shouldn't have done this, and regret and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that, you know.
Yeah, we have to be able to, and that's where it's so great. And this has been really helpful with going through parenting, is kind of going, how do I want to parent my child? But then also going, how do I want to do that for myself? Provide for my own emotional needs, comfort myself, encourage and positive praise and all those sort of things. And so what's really keen for us to talk through is you've got an amazing framework here, which are sort of 4 quadrants of different types of parenting.
Yes.
And I'd really love for us to go through that. Firstly, to see, you know, what the different types of parenting are.
Yes.
And the effect it has, and what the type of parenting really helpful is. So could you talk a little bit?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I even printed it out to remind myself. So if you kind of imagine a quadrant, so you've got, you know, an x-axis and a y-axis, and you know, what I will always say to parents is that you're not going to be in all one, but it's the sort of knock-on effect. So along the bottom, you've got low to high, and you've got level of connection and level of compassion. And this is, I guess, you know, you can think of it both for yourself and the connection for your child. And then up the side, you've got level of cooperation. Now, I mean, when I describe it, I talk about the you know, kids' level of cooperation, but you could also think of it as a kind of level of motivation, actually. So, you know, relating it to a child, if you're trying to get a child to do something, and you've got a low connection and a low level of cooperation, of compassion, you'll often find that their level of cooperation is low when you do things like nag at them, make hollow threats. So things that they just know that you're not going to see through. You know, you might say, right, you know, you're not going to the party, or parents will often do it in a social situation. They'll go, right, we're leaving. And they, you know, the kid knows that you're not going to leave, but they're not going to stop, you know, I don't know, spitting their water or kind of annoying the friend. And they'll very often ignore us. So it would be kind of interesting to see how you would connect that with reparenting. I mean,
I think it's about, well, there's not the compassion, but without, so no compassion and no boundaries. And so you're not going to have compassion for your emotions and your behaviors, and you're not going to be boundaries. You're going to be finding it really hard to you know, commit to something and then do it. But because you've got compassion, you're probably going to be really hard on yourself about that.
Yes.
And then kind of getting really annoyed at yourself when you don't.
Yes.
And I see a lot of that around depression, actually. That and when you don't have the compassion for the emotions, you're going to numb them because you can't, it's really hard to feel them if you're compassionate and accepting of them.
Yeah.
If you numb those emotions and you're finding it really hard to have boundaries with yourself and do things like exercise and exercise, if you're finding yourself in that depression area, this might be an area of working compassionate for your emotions and having more boundaries with yourself.
No, that's a really interesting way of putting it. So in the other quadrant where you might be able to, and this could be to force yourself to do something or force a child, you're doing it through fear. So, you know, you're really kind of, you know, you're scaring them. You know, you can use things with kids like, you know, I'm going to tell the policeman, or I'm going to tell your teacher, or, you know, something that I'm leaving. You know, they may do what you've asked through fear, but it doesn't have that level of compassion and connection. And also there's a kind of resentment because, you know, you might do it, and yet you kind of resent yourself for doing it, or you resent the parent for sort of forcing it into you.
So thinking that in terms of what we see, that sounds like someone the world is not safe. You know, things and scary things happen, and you don't have the safety and connection and compassion of other people. And you're probably struggling to provide that for yourself. And one of the things we do when we've experienced that really harsh sort of towards ourselves, we start being that harsh parent as well. And so people can be the most horrible to themselves, and the sort of things we'll say to ourselves, it's like if you like wrote it down and said that somebody said this to their friend, you'd be outraged. And we'll say these things to ourselves. So that's where I'd see someone who's really self-negative, but also a really fearful view of the world. Very like, and when you have that sort of fearful view of the world, sometimes that can lead to, you know, that whole compliance can be, you know, they'll do what the parent says, but then in later life, that can actually lead to restriction. So you go, it's safe to go out, you know, something bad could happen, you know, I could get in trouble, so I'm just not going to go. And then your life becomes smaller and smaller. Even with something like agoraphobia, where you struggle to actually go and do normal functioning and go out, and sometimes even to the extent where you can't leave your home. So it's really important that we're given confidence in the world, and when there's these sort of real punitive punishments and scary things happen, it can lead, depending on the temperament of the person.
Absolutely.
Or be that fight back. But you probably still have that really negative sort of voice in your head, and it's learning how to be more compassionate in that situation. More compassionate with yourself. You might be more boundary with yourself if there was kind of, there's boundaries but not with the compassion, but you really need to work on being compassionate, and especially your emotions, because often it's that lack of room for with connection, compassion. There isn't room for emotions that don't fit.
It's so interesting hearing you describe it this way, because, you know, it's not how I would know how to describe it. So it's lovely to hear your expertise coming out. And then you know, you can be with a child, you can be sort of compassionate to them, but you can perhaps be confusing them because you're giving in too much. So like, you know, you're not holding the boundaries. So, you know, that and often parents will flip-flop between sort of, you know, coming down too hard on something, or just kind of giving anything for an easy life, but actually doesn't become an easy life because you then don't have the level of respect from your child that you want, and it's confusing for them. So, you know, if you've said, you know, no snack, no snack, no snack, oh, for God's sake, take the crisps. I mean, that's a small thing, and you can get away with that. But if it's really consistent that you are just, you know, at the sort of mercy of them wearing you down, and nagging at you, and you just, you know, you kind of, oh, all right then. It is just, you know, even just to things like if you've said 3 stories, and then you get to the 3rd and they're like, no, I want another, I want another, I want another. Oh, all right, darling. You know, like I say, occasionally it's fine, you know, then I would say, you'd say, look, you know, okay, I've decided that I will tonight, but it's just that, you know, if you're consistently inconsistent.
Yeah.
And how would you?
That one sounds like more of a difficulty with, again, with those boundaries. So
Boundaries, yeah.
With get through as well. So it's like, if I got upset enough, then the thing wouldn't happen. And
yes,
because I know with children you see that rise, that the intensity of their upset and their tantrum rise, especially if they know that if they hit a certain peak, you'll. And so they've learned to ramp up their emotions to get what they want. But really distressing being at that point.
Yes.
And especially if that's where you feel you get your needs met, when you get really upset.
Yes.
And it can lead to this escalation of feeling like you have to, you know, you have to be really serious. Yeah. And that was actually something for myself. I don't know if it was because I don't think my parents would do the giving in, but I did learn that if there was a ramping up, that I wouldn't have to do something like a group or something. And
so that's a kind of a giving in, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
But and again, doing the best they could.
Yeah, of course.
I was really distressed, but I learned that, and that wasn't helpful for my adult life. And because as things got hard, these emotions would get more and more and more and more intense. And it's important for kids to learn that they can sit with hard emotions.
Yes.
If we support them through it, and this is, as an adult, you learn to support yourself through those hard emotions, but that peak and then they come back down again, and that the world goes on, and you know, something horrible didn't happen just because we're feeling really hard emotions. So a mixture of that, the ramping of intensity of your emotions, but also not learning to see things through. When you say you're going to do something, even if it's hard and maybe it wasn't the best thing, you know, best choice, made that choice, you see it through, and then you learn the lesson and you move on. It's so important to get that stick with it, you know. And a reparenting I'm learning is to really stick with things and to sit through and to keep going, and that's something we need to learn, and that those boundaries for ourselves, because we get so much more out of something when we keep going with it. And start with, you know, your first time is always really hard, and you usually do something, but if you can continue going, you can get to mastery. And we want to be able to do that. And if we haven't been modeled seeing things through and sticking with things, then it's a lot harder to do it. And so if you're finding it hard to do that, I think that would be an area of working on those boundaries.
Boundaries. And then, you know, what we're kind of leading to, you know, what we're aiming at is like we've said, you know, having just those consistent boundaries. It's really, really hard, you know. I mean, I get it, you know. It's so hard to consistently keep those boundaries, and it's also between parents. If you're, you know, co-parenting, it's just, you know, you can have arguments about things around that. So that is hard, but the children do definitely thrive with that, and they definitely, you know, they need to respect us. And I suppose, you know, we need to respect ourselves. I mean, we really, you know, we need to listen to ourselves. So, you know, how I describe it is like respect and listen and feel connected. And that, you know, with the reparenting, it's the same. You want to respect yourself, you want to listen to yourself, and you want to feel connected to yourself. And you know,
real connections there with self. Disconnecting from your emotions. And we are more emotional beings than we are thinking beings. And we disconnect from our emotions and go, these are certain emotions that I'm not going to have anything to do with. Then it is that it's the disconnection from yourself and lack of compassion and acceptance. Those parts. Yeah, definitely.
And then, yeah, and it's just, you know, that's where when you as a parent, if you can kind of do what you can to sort of, you know, stay within those consistent boundaries, having that emotional awareness to your child, and like, you know, with reparenting, it be to yourself, listen, you know, they respect you more, and they feel more connected with you. And then, you know, when they'll do things that, you know, they'll lie, they'll you know, they'll sort of say, you know, absolutely barefaced that they didn't take the chocolate. And
face.
And what'd you say?
I can see it on your face.
Yes, exactly.
And your fingers. You definitely took the chocolate.
You definitely did. But, you know, it's sort of, but if you've got that connection with them, and you're not judging, and you're not making threats, and you're not going, oh, well, never mind, you know, then you can give them the kind of safe space to own up to it. And they know that, you know, nothing bad is going to happen, and they're not a bad person for having, you know, tried to sneak some chocolate and not, you know, and being caught. But it's, yeah, so you know, you really need them to be able to have that kind of respect and trust, that whatever they do, whatever trouble they get into. I mean, I remember my eldest son came home and he ran upstairs. He would have been about 6 or 7. And he ran upstairs very quickly to his bedroom after school. And I was like, there's something going on there. And I went up and I heard him kind of, you know, scuffling with a box. And I looked in the box and he didn't want me to look. And I said, let me just see. And there was this little pack of Haribos. And it turned out that, you know, and he was like, no, my friend gave them to me. And there was something, it was suspicious, you know? And there was a lot of, you know, my friend gave them to me, that was it. No, mummy, you don't understand it. Yeah, and then, you know, just through being really gentle and kind of feeding back, like, I can see, I think, you know, from your actions, I think there's something else there. I think you're embarrassed about it. That you don't want to tell me because you're worried that I'm going to get cross with you. And, you know, we talk about telling the truth and all that. Anyway, eventually he said that for some reason he'd been asked to go back to the class to get something when they'd gone down to sport. And he'd gone to the teacher's drawer where he knew she kept these treats. And he'd taken the bag of Haribos. And, you know, it's that kind of like, he thought he could get away with it. And so, you know, it really took time to uncover that, and for him to not feel like he was a really bad person for doing it. And then he wrote a note. You know, we discussed it. I didn't make him, but I really strongly suggested that would be a good way to make amends. So he wrote a note, and we went to her the next day, or maybe it was a couple of days later, with the bag and the note. And he said, I took these from your drawer. And it was huge to do that. But it, you know, it came from the fact that there was the connection with us. He didn't feel like I was gonna, you know, that he was a bad person for doing it. So there's stuff that goes on.
It's so interesting, because that's that mixture of compassion and boundaries.
Yes.
And it's really interesting, because I think we get the most angry in arguments with people close to us, especially when we know we're not really in the right.
Yes.
But we're lying to ourselves. There's like this kind of inner lie to ourselves when we're going, no, they're wrong and I'm right.
Yes.
It kind of starts dawning on us that maybe actually even they might be wrong, but the way I'm behaving and the way I'm treating them right now is actually not okay.
Yes.
And more angry, it's that whole, I don't want to be a bad person.
Yeah.
And so really project, especially when we're starting to get into that maybe I'm a bad person thought. That's when I see people lashing out the worst, is when they're starting to register that, but don't want to fully connect with that. And I think it takes a lot of personal work to develop that connection with yourself, to be able to recognize these things, recognize I'm getting very angry right now, and it's a toothbrush that's in the wrong place. And
Yeah.
maybe my, you know, World War III anger right now isn't matching the toothbrush. Need to take self-reflection and what's going on here.
Yeah.
And then having those boundaries, but even like having the boundary that when I do something and I recognize I've done something wrong, I'm going to do something to repair that.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to the person and say, hey, the way I reacted to you putting your toothbrush there was really out of proportion to the toothbrush.
Yeah.
And is actually, that was more my issue. And I need to own that, you know, regardless of what the toothbrush is, the fact that I yelled at you for putting a toothbrush in the face wasn't okay.
Yeah.
That those boundaries that you will, and the connection to acknowledge, but then the boundaries that you're going to do, you know, work through that. But you can't do that. You can't do those repairs if you are thinking, I'm such a horrible, terrible, bad person.
Yes.
Because our mouth can't handle that.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's so important that you are able to sort of, and I think parents who are able to separate the child from the behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Love you, you're good, you know, and you are, the behavior wasn't okay.
Yes.
And we're going to deal with the behavior, we're going to do, you know, repair for the behavior, but we're not repairing you. We're not repairing your worth.
You're okay. And you know, coming back to what I was mentioning at the beginning about this whole kind of, it's a reflection on me, you know, what I will always encourage parents to just think about is that kids just do stuff. You know, they steal, they lie, they hit other kids, they bite, you know, and it doesn't mean to say that you're a bad parent because of it. And nor does it mean to say that they're a bad kid. But, you know, we can, and, you know, I could have done the soft bit. I could have just gone, oh, well, you know, never mind. We'll just, you know, she'll never find out. Or I could have done the hard bit, you know, the sort of punishment. But I knew that it was just, he wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't a bad parent. And therefore, that I did need to help to see it through, which is the boundaries and the kind of, that kind of, you know, the consistency and the, you know, doing sort of being your word on things. So it's, but it's, it does, you know, like it kind of does throw up so much, and you can get really angry because of your stuff, you know, because like, I'm not a good enough parent because my kid's stolen. So I'm going to get really angry about this. Or, you know, you don't even choose it. You just out it comes.
Yeah.
And that can happen too. And sometimes you've got to, I say, like, rewind. You know?
Guys, like,
apologize.
It's so important as parents to actually step back and say, actually, that wasn't okay. And I'm going to say sorry. Like, modeling that okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really valuable. You know, if you walk around never making mistakes and never apologizing to your children and then expect them to say sorry for everything, it's like, where's the model that it's okay to not get it right?
Yeah.
To not get it right first time, to maybe have difficult emotions that you didn't handle the best, and that you come back and say, that wasn't okay, I'm sorry.
I mean, the amount of times I've lost my rag. I mean, it's, you know, I say the amount of time, it is a lot rarer than it would have been had I not done the work. But, you know, there are times when it's like this, it just builds up. And now they'll kind of go, whoa, where did that come from? You know? But yeah, the apologizing is so great. And, you know, and then forgiving yourself, you know, which comes back into that kind of, you know, that loop that, you know, that we make mistakes.
And once we can parent that to our children and show that to our children, then as they grow up and hit that adulthood, they can be in a place where it's okay to say sorry, and then being able to do that internal forgiveness is so important. Being able to kind of go, I messed up, I'm not a bad person,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
forgive myself and let that go.
Yeah.
You know, and move forward, because I think with some anxieties, there's definitely reflection on the past and beating yourself up.
Yes.
Say the right thing to the right person.
Yes.
You know, it's not quite right. You know, I should have done this and shouldn't have done that and
Yes.
stuff. To accept, you know, that's what happened.
Yes.
And, you know, if you need to make amends for it, but then moving forward.
Yeah. And the kind of, you know, the giving in, so, you know, that kind of not sticking with your commitment. You know, saying you were going to go to the exercise class, or, you know, whatever it was that you, and then going, oh, I just can't be bothered. You can then get into that horrible loop, can't you, of kind of like, I said I was going to go to class, I didn't, and now I'm, you know, self-flagellation. I'm such a, you know, I'm so bad, and then it deepens.
Builds that lack of self-confidence as well in what you say that you'll do. And then the shame, especially if it's in connection with friends, like I didn't go to the thing that I said I was going to do.
Yes.
And so building up those boundaries with yourself builds up that confidence that, you know, when you say something, you're going to do it, and being able to project into the future and say, I'm going to do this thing, and know that you're going to actually do it is so important and powerful as an adult, because that's where you can start seeing progress in your life. And we see quite a lot of people who are at a point in their life where they're really struggling to feel like they're getting anywhere and getting that progress. And building those boundaries with yourself, you know, that when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it even when it's hard. It's part of that building, so that you can have a really rewarding and enjoyable life, because you can plan into the future and actually achieve the things you want to. So both sides of, and that's one of the things I love about your parenting style, and why I'm so keen on having these sort of conversations with you, is because one of the things I found with your parenting style is I was like, I could say this to another adult. I would want to make sure I wasn't, you know, how I was saying it.
All excitable.
I had the right relationship with them.
Yes.
But it was showing compassion for their emotions and kind of just showing connection with them. And there's been times actually when I've been talking to a friend and I've used one of the things that you do, where you acknowledge, you know, how they're possibly feeling, and then I've asked them if they want to connect. And it's been amazing the amount of times where that's just been a really powerful and emotional moment for my friend, where it's like, you get my emotion, you accept my emotion, and you care about me, and you're willing to, you're not trying to problem solve it, you're not trying to fix it, you know, we're not in that cerebral kind of mode. Like, just like feeling and connecting with that person on an emotional level. And it's so powerful to do that. And when we can do that with ourselves, it just makes such a difference about how we feel about ourselves and our life. And so it's great to have that. And a mark of really good parenting is when you're not treating a child like a completely different being to a human.
Yes, absolutely.
The human experience, and it needs to be modeled in such a way that is understandable for the child, but it's helpful. And I think it's helpful because it connects with the child's self in all of us. Yes. It's that, more vulnerable part of ourselves that we really need, that love, connection, compassion, but also to feel safe. So and putting that out into the world and providing that resource for parents, because it's not necessarily what all the parenting experts are talking about in terms of that. And I'm really excited to see a really mentally healthy way of approaching parenting, and that's really found with your stuff, and why we're so excited as anxiety specialists to connect with you and what you do.
And ditto.
You just watched a clip of a live I did on Instagram with an amazing parenting expert, Camilla, where we talked about reparenting and how that can affect your life. If you found this helpful and really enjoyed it, then like it and subscribe to the channel. We'll be putting out more content on anxiety and how you can live a happier and healthier life.